Calm Health is here to help you better understand your own mental and physical health with a library of digital programs created by psychologists that you can explore at your own pace. Learn more at calmhealth.com.
You know what I've always been really curious about? Why you?
Why me what?
Like, she's very suspicious of a lot of things. She really can turn on a dime on anybody.
She has on me.
And yet, I do have a sense that she specifically trusts you in some way. Do you have any guesses why?
I mean, sometimes I've thought, like, maybe I remind her of her daughter. I don't know. You know, when
Wait, of Ashley?
Yeah. I mean, she described Ashley as, like, basically, like, an acquired taste. Like, people didn't feel neutrally towards Ashley. You either loved her or you hated her.
I'm Hannah Rosen.
And I'm Lauren Ober. And from The Atlantic, this is We Live Here Now.
The she in that conversation is Mickey Withoff, the mother of the only person shot and killed on January 6th. We introduced you to her in the previous episode. She moved into our D.C. neighborhood to get some sort of justice for her daughter. And that quest takes the form of a vigil held outside the D.C. jail every night, uninterrupted for 2 years. Do you remember the first time you decided to go to the vigil?
I was ramping up to go to the vigil for days. Like, I kept being like, tonight's the night I'm going to go to the vigil. Tonight's the night I'm going to go to the vigil.
How did you think they were going to treat you or talk to you?
Before I showed up there, I definitely thought that, like, I was going to get kicked out or something. I just figured I would be met at bare minimum with, like, intense skepticism. Like, who is this person?
Right.
Why are they here?
Right. Lauren, I have a really good idea. Can you read me that script that you wrote on the Notes app, please? Now, right now.
Okay, in my own defense, I sometimes bumble my words, so I needed a little guidance. So that's just a caveat. It said, "Hey, I'm Lauren. I make audio documentaries, and I recently heard about your vigils and wanted to know more about what's been going on down here."
That's good. That's good. Thumbs up. Very good.
Thank you. Glad you approve. Anyway, I got out of my car. I walked towards a bunch of American flags, which were an obvious tell that I was in the right place. I passed a truck that had the words "We the People" stenciled on it. And then there was another one parked right next to it with a 1776 sticker in the window. So
clearly you were in the right place.
Because also you have to understand the physical geography of the vigil is like down at the end of a sidewalk. And the sidewalk starts at the top of this little hill and you land at the end of the sidewalk where the vigil is. And so it's like, you can see the enemy coming.
Anything that's the J6 videos, go to stophate.com.
When I landed at the vigil, there's a table set up with some speakers and a sound system, and behind that, a bunch of American flags. There's another table for snacks and coffee and a couple of camp chairs strewn about. And the whole of Freedom Corner was ringed by metal barricades set up by police. When I arrived, I spotted Mickey, gathered up my nerve, walked up to her, and delivered my script. It went about as well as you might expect. But she didn't kick me out. She just put out her cigarette and walked back toward the various cameras live streaming the vigil. Since that first time I went, I've now been to the vigil maybe a dozen times. And this is generally how it goes. The guys in the prison, which they call the DC Gulag, are in a segregated wing of the DC jail, which they call the Patriot Pod. Most of them are in there awaiting trial or sentencing for charges like assault and civil disorder relating to January 6th. And every night between 7 and 9 p.m., a bunch of them call into the vigil. But before that, there's a roll call.
Duke Wilson.
Hero.
Ricky Wilden.
0.
Shane Woods.
0.
Chris Worrell.
0.
John
During
Ray.
this roll call, someone at the vigil reads off the names of people detained as a result of January 6th, plus the people who died on January 6th and the folks who took their lives after the riot. There are so many names that the roll call takes a solid 5-6 minutes to get through. At the end of this portion of the vigil, the assembled crowd, maybe 5 to 10 people, maybe more, breaks into a chant.
Now let's say her name. Ashley Babbitt. Ashley Babbitt. Ashley Babbitt. Ashley Babbitt.
Anyway, the combination of vibes is weird. On one hand, it's like a funeral that never ends. And as such, it's appropriately somber. A young woman died, and here on this corner, time stands still for her and for her mother. Every night at the vigil is Ashley Babbitt night. But then the other vibe is like a MAGA rally or a tent revival. Because after the chants, it's time for the prisoners/patriots to call into the vigil and testify.
Hey, what's going on?
From inside the jail, the J6ers call out to one of the vigil goers' phones, and then whoever fields the call broadcasts it through the speakers on Freedom Corner.
Oh, just living that American dream out here on Freedom Corner.
Out there on Freedom Corner, right next to the graveyard.
That's right.
Every night.
They talk about all kinds of goings-on in the jail. The homemade haircuts, the rank food, the bodybuilding competitions. They send messages to their wives and solicit donations for their legal fees. And almost to a person, they use their nightly phone calls to air their grievances against the government, which are many. That first night I went, one guy called in and said he couldn't believe that people who love America could be made out as terrorists. Tammy, one of Mickey's roommates, fielded that call and commiserated.
I never thought I'd see the day that people would go to jail for thought crimes, but as I've been here in D.C. the last several months, I've seen it over and over again.
Another guy called in to explain that he hadn't really committed a crime.
If you were there, it does not match the narrative that is being portrayed on the outside. So.
Then this electrician from New Jersey called in with some choice words about America.
In 10 years, or in 5 years, or in 8 years, America's going to be a shithole. It doesn't matter whether it's 20 years from now or 10 years from now.
You're right.
It's still going to be a shithole.
Basically, every vigil goes this way.
If we don't win in the next year,
It's over.
That's true. He's not
that's
wrong.
it.
Obviously not you.
None of the guys who call in say they did anything wrong. Most of them say they're being mistreated. And they refer to themselves as political prisoners. And more recently, hostages. The folks at the vigil, like Mickey's housemate, Nicole, use this language too.
At this point, he is now really a hostage. He's no longer a political prisoner. He's done his time. He is a hostage.
Hostage, political prisoner. Trump himself has picked up this rhetoric.
I am the political prisoner of a failing nation, but I will soon be free on November 5th, the most important day in the history of our country.
So this little homespun vigil operation, organized by our neighbor, has somehow transmitted this language, these ideas, from jail payphones to Freedom Corner loudspeakers to YouTube live streams to Trump's mouth. How did that even happen? But then, that first day I was there, something else happened too. One of the men who called in was Jeffrey Sable. He's a Colorado geophysicist convicted of beating and dragging a law enforcement officer down the Capitol stairs.
Same old stuff in here. It's just another day.
He gave a short update on the boring goings-on in the jail. Some guys were working out, some guys were watching TV, and some guys were in need of a lesson on cleaning up.
You know, Jeff always says it's Groundhog Day in there, but it's Hotel California for us out here.
And then Mickey got on the phone and explained that there was somebody from the neighborhood in attendance tonight.
So we actually have informed the neighbors
Wow.
tonight. Yeah.
Just one at a time.
You gotta take them how you get them.
Now, you could see this as a cute little outreach, or you could see it as vaguely menacing. Like, welcome to our little corner, you spy. We see you, we know you're here, and I'm telling the guys on the inside, there's an outsider here. Mickey sent a message that night for sure, though just what it meant, I didn't know. But it did make me want to know more about the woman running this Groundhog Day funeral / conspiracy corner mini MAGA rally. Was this vigil the result of grief gone haywire? Or was it some sort of shrewd political movement? At the end of that first visit to the vigil, Mickey offered me coffee and a slice of blueberry pie. A nice gesture for sure, but I don't drink coffee, and I don't eat fruit pie. And I definitely do not eat when I'm on a very important reporting mission. But I did appreciate the offer. It felt neighborly, so I kept returning to the vigil. How are ya?
Good, how are you?
Great. What's going on?
Another beautiful night.
Vigilizing.
Vigilizing.
You're vigilizing. Yeah. And I got to be pretty friendly with the folks there, including Mickey's housemate, Nicole.
God bless them, but that is not the mastermind that was taking over our government that day. The Proud Boys were not.
I know this is weird, but one day we joked about militias. Because during a conversation, I got the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers confused.
Oh, that was the Oath Keepers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know, you gotta get your militia straight. If you're gonna come down here, you've gotta know your militia straight.
You know, I can't, there are too many splinter groups and, you know.
There's factions, there's levels.
Listen.
There's color coding.
Listen, when the gay militia happens, I'm there. Okay, when that happens, until then.
We're a country of militias, you know. Well, the thing that I find funny about people thinking about...
Because Freedom Corner isn't exactly a place to have an intimate conversation, what with all the roll calling and patriotizing, I wanted to visit Mickey and her crew at the Eagle's Nest, a white row house just down the block. So I asked if I could come over. Where are we right now?
Our common space, our living area.
Where?
DC.
This is the other White House.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's what I've been calling it.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I like
the
that.
other White House, we like that.
The Eagle's Nest is a 4-bedroom rental with an American flag hanging out front and a red, white, and blue pinwheel in the yard. Do you want to call it the real White House?
I would say this White House is way more legitimate than the one over there.
I figured you would say that. The first thing I noticed right away was how devoid the house was of MAGA anything. Bald eagle stuffed animals? Check. A whiteboard with the names of their enemies, including Lieutenant Michael Byrd, the guy who runs Cowboys for Trump, and, quote, that bitch Judge Friedrich? Check. But no real Trump anything. That surprised me. I thought they were all about MAGA. But judging by their decor, it seemed like they were mostly all about the US of A. There are like 9,000 American flags in here.
Well, we have some.
You have so many flags in here. There's another one. American flag comforter.
Well, it went with our motif.
At the time of my first visit, Mickey lived in a house with 2 other women. Nicole Reffitt, whose husband Guy was the first person to be tried and sentenced for January 6-related crimes. And Tammy Perryman, whose partner Brian Jackson was held in the D.C. jail for more than a year as his J6 case made its way through the court. The 3 women spend their days going to court for trials and sentencing hearings, making jail visits, and meeting with politicians on Capitol Hill.
And then we come home, and then we make coffee and go to the vigil.
Okay.
We do like to be home around 3.
And then we come home, and then we have a pretty late dinner, and then we go to bed, and then we get up and do it all over again.
In the 2 years that the trio have been in D.C., they become almost like Washington insiders. They know their way around the D.C. federal court docket and congressional buildings way better than I do. And I've been a reporter here for more than a decade. None of you had ever been to a congressional hearing before.
I didn't even know you could go to a congressional hearing. And I thought that the people that were running the country were supposed to be smarter than the average everyday citizen, and they're not.
What about you, Mickey? Were you this invested in the news and politics?
No, I lived in blissful ignorance.
What does that mean?
That means I was lucky enough to live in the same house for 24 years and raise my children. And then my husband and I moved onto a boat and we lived in the San Diego Bay. And my life was good. I was happy.
Mickey describes her life before Ashley's death as uncomplicated. She worked in a daycare and read a million books. She gardened and she hung out with her family. She didn't have a lot of money and sometimes things were tight. But she liked her life, even through the pandemic. Her peace was only slightly interrupted by her daughter coming over and going on and on about mask mandates or missing ballots or whatever.
Ashley would talk to me about politics and I'm like, you know what, baby, go get them. But not me. I'm gonna go sit on my boat, I'm gonna read my book, I'm gonna eat my popcorn, I'm gonna pet my dog, I'm gonna stick my feet in the water, I'm gonna go work my couple hours in the morning with my little teeny baby lovables. And then I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna love my life and live my life. And that is truly what I did. I had no patience for politics. And I kind of had the attitude where I can't fix it. You're kind of stuck in the status quo. Your life's good, what's the problem? But then it's not anymore.
Mickey and her daughter Ashley lived about 12 minutes from each other in San Diego. Mickey on her boat and Ashley in an old-school hippie surf neighborhood called Ocean Beach. But at the time of Ashley's death, the pair weren't really speaking and they hadn't seen much of each other in months, the result of a family spat that Mickey didn't want to get into with me. So Mickey had no idea Ashley was planning to go to Trump's Stop the Steal rally on January 6th. She didn't really know anything about the event.
I didn't even realize what was going on in D.C. was going to be such a big freaking deal. I was very much removed from that.
Ashley traveled to D.C. by herself. She texted her husband a selfie and wrote, "Tons of Trump supporters on my plane." After Trump's speech, Ashley walked to the Capitol and made her way inside the building. At some point that afternoon, Mickey remembers getting a call from her daughter-in-law telling her that Ashley was hurt. The details about what happened next are cloudy for Mickey. But in the days that followed January 6, Ashley's remains were cremated and brought back to San Diego by a family friend. The family grieved and had a memorial, and a debate raged in the country about whether Mickey's daughter was a hero or a monster. It was all too much for Mickey.
And I spent quite a few months literally underwater. It's a very intense time, Lauren. It can blur one day into another, and next thing you know, you've been underwater for 6 months.
Mickey could barely get up to bathe or eat.
I had not watched any television, couldn't listen to music, couldn't turn on the radio. But in the process, I had a dream about Ashley. It was about political prisoners. She had been arrested for shooting a red, white, and blue rocket around the moon. And she said they're gonna, execute her. And she was like, I'm a goner. And I was like, get in my purse and let's go. She's like, no. I said, well, then just tell him you didn't do it. She said, I won't tell him I didn't do it. And I'd do it again. And I'm a goner. These are the people you need to worry about. We were in a cell full of people. It was more like a cage, more like a chain link cage with just a whole bunch of people and her. Fresh out of the shower, talking about how they were going to kill her. I couldn't help her, but it fostered my concern for other people that were affected by the situation.
Even in her haze, Mickey was inching towards a different version of herself. This woman who had never cared about politics, committed to a task. She would get out of bed and make one phone call every day.
That's really all I could do. I would get up and I'd make calls to Nancy Pelosi's office, Dianne Feinstein's office, Tad DeBias, Congressman Issa, although he'll argue the point that I didn't. I know I did. It's in my death notebook. And
your what now?
My death notebook. That's what I call it. After Ashley died, I had notes every time I talked to somebody. I know it's kind of a morbid thing to say, but that's what it is.
Mickey didn't get anywhere with those folks, and that's not surprising. But something else happened.
Probably about 3 months in, my friend Wilma came over and said, you have got to get up, get in the shower, and get the fuck outside. Get some sunlight, get some whatever you need to do. You need to start with the shower and let's go. So, and she would walk with me and listen to me, you know, a true blessing.
Her friend Wilma figured Mickey needed to do more than just her one phone call a day. So she suggested an outing.
She decided to take me on a Mother's Day healing trip. So she has a camper, and off to Sacramento we went. And we were going to talk to some people.
You were going there because it's the capital.
We were.
Not because it's a cool place to hang out.
Right. But it was actually an amazing trip. The Capitol was closed down, fenced off. But we had little flyers that we handed out and some bracelets, and the city did not receive us well.
People didn't want the bracelets or the flyers, and they definitely didn't want to hear about January 6th. But then on the way home,
we were in a campsite, and I heard Paul Gosar had said something about Ashley.
Was Ashley Babbitt armed?
That's Republican Congressman Paul Gosar of Arizona.
Again, Congressman, I mean to be respectful of your observations, but I just don't want to talk about individual situations or...
Clearly reclaiming my time, Mr. Rosen. No, she wasn't. She was wrapped in a U.S. flag.
What Mickey heard was Congressman Gosar questioning Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen during a House Oversight Committee hearing on May 12th, 2021, just after Mother's Day.
Was the death of Ashley Babbitt a homicide?
Congressman, I'm not trying to be unhelpful here, but I just cannot comment.
I understand, but I mean, reclaiming my time, as the death certificate says, it was a homicide.
And that was my first glimmer of hope into that somebody is paying attention.
Talking about Ashley this way, Gosar seemed to be trying to tell a different story about January 6th. And Hannah was interested in how this retelling evolved.
At the very beginning, a lot of Republicans, including Trump loyalists, condemned the riots. For example, on January 7th, Republican Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma said he had witnessed Ashley's shooting, and the officer who shot her, quote, didn't have a choice. Mullen talked about him with great sympathy, and he called the Capitol police officers the real heroes.
And his actions may be judged in a lot of different ways moving forward, but his actions, I believe, saved people's lives even more.
On Tucker Carlson's show, Representative Jim Banks, a Republican from Indiana, called for the rioters to be prosecuted.
Well, Tucker, this was an absolutely wrenching, heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching day on Capitol Hill today. As someone who's worn the uniform and served our country abroad in Afghanistan and now serving my country on Capitol Hill, I couldn't believe what I was seeing unfold right before my eyes here in our nation's capital.
Even Trump weighed in.
The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay.
Here and there, a Trump supporter, like Congressman Matt Gaetz, would drop a hint that maybe Antifa was involved. But it wasn't until spring, just as Mickey was poking out of her grief hole, that a new line about January 6th started to coalesce. It came at first from the fringe, but the powerful fringe. Gosar is a far-right congressman known for his association with white supremacists and his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. If you remember, Mickey told us that prior to January 6th, she wasn't at all political. So at the time, she didn't know Paul Gosar. What she did know was that he tweeted a photo of Ashley in her Air Force uniform with the caption, "They took her life. They could not take her pride." A paraphrase of a U2 lyric, which is actually about Martin Luther King Jr. And then in July 2021, Gosar invited Mickey to be his guest at the Turning Point USA Student Action Conference in Phoenix, which is a group that trains student leaders to combat liberalism on campus. So Mickey and Wilma hopped in the RV and drove to Arizona. When they arrived, they were escorted to Gosar's VIP seats.
On my wrist is a memory wristband. Who killed Ashley Babbitt?
Mickey had no idea what to expect. But then...
I want you to hold your applause for 1 second. I want you to hold your applause for 1 second. Because that lightning struck again. In our midst, who came all the way over here to tell you thank you, is Ashley Babbitt's mom, Mick Wilbur.
In case you didn't catch that, he called her Mick Wilbur. Anyway, the point is, after all that time trying to talk to congresspeople, one of them was finally talking back.
What has she given? She has given everything. Her daughter. We need answers. Things weren't right that day.
Gosar then walked to the end of the stage and stopped where Mickey and Wilma were seated. The pair stood and held up 2 huge homemade signs. The crowd cheered. Someone gave Mickey a hug. Afterwards, Gosar followed up with her.
But he made no promises other than the fact that he was going to go to the jail.
It was just one thing, but it meant a huge amount to Mickey.
I had hopes for some justice in my daughter and for people to have some righteous indignation about her murder and the way that she died, and I felt like people were becoming aware of that. It did feel like there was momentum.
I'm Josh Levine. In this season of Slow Burn, we'll dive into the moment in the early 2000s when Fox News became a political and cultural force.
I'm killing CNN. Killing them. Murdering them.
You'll hear from Fox insiders, many who've never spoken out before, and from people outside Fox who tried to stop it.
You're being sued by Fox. And I went, really? That's fabulous.
Slow Burn Season 10, The Rise of Fox News. Out now, wherever you listen.
After the rally, Mickey went back home to San Diego. And then Trump sent Ashley's family a video tribute on what would have been her 36th birthday.
It is my great honor to address each of you gathered today to cherish the memory of Ashley Babbitt, a truly incredible person. Together we grieve her terrible loss. There was no reason Ashley should have lost her life that day. We must all demand justice for Ashley and her family. So on this solemn occasion, as we celebrate her life, we renew our call for a fair and nonpartisan investigation into the death of Ashley Babbitt.
And in Washington, the momentum continued. In November of 2021, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Louis Gohmert visited the D.C. jail. They soon issued a report called Unusually Cruel.
Unusually Cruel. That's the title that we gave this report, because this is the treatment that we found of the pretrial January 6 defendants being held right here in Washington, D.C. in the jail.
The report, the jail visit, the press conference, it was all starting to paint a picture to match what Mickey felt and what Gosar had said at the rally. Something was wrong that day.
Right now, what we have happening in America is a 2-tier justice system.
They mentioned the conspiracy that it was government plants who started the violence.
If they were going to charge with someone with insurrection, it's beginning to sound more and more like those would be agents for the federal government that were there stirring things up.
And that the defendants were not so much criminals, but victims of government overreach.
My question is this. Mr. Biden, Attorney General Garland, why are you so interested in ruining the lives of these folks instead of equal justice? Why won't you publicly release the hours and hours of video surveillance taken on January 6th? What are you hiding?
As this alternate reality of January 6th was getting colored in, it wasn't as hard for Mickey to get people to say Ashley's name. January 6th, Ashley Babbitt, these terms were no longer political liabilities.
Back in San Diego, Mickey was getting restless. People around her just wanted her to move on, to move through her grief and come out the other side. They would tell her that the forces she was up against to try to get justice for Ashley were just too big to fight. But she just couldn't let it go.
Obviously, I just was lost. I was lost. And I've never been an extremely religious person, but I do believe in a higher power, and I did need something. So I did go home and pray about it. And then it was clear to me that I needed to be here in D.C., but I'm not a woman of means, so I had to, get organized and funded to get here.
By August 2022, Mickey had raised enough money for a flight and a 1-month stay. She didn't have a plan, but she figured being in the belly of the beast was better than sitting on the sidelines in San Diego waiting for change. On August 1st, she landed in D.C. and drove straight to the federal courthouse. Inside was the first sentencing for a J6er convicted by a jury. Nicole Reffitt's husband Guy had come to the Capitol that day with a handgun in his pocket and an AR-15 stashed in his hotel room. He told his fellow 3%ers that he intended to drag Nancy Pelosi out of the building by her ankles. His then 18-year-old son Jackson turned him into the FBI. Nicole had no idea what kind of sentence her husband would get. Would it be a slap on the wrist type of sentence or more like a hard-bitten felon kind of sentence? Turns out it was somewhere in the middle, a little more than 7 years in federal prison. Nicole's family was the J6 test case, and Mickey wanted to be there to support her, just like Ashley told her to do in that dream. And that's when the mother of the martyr and the wife of political prisoner number 376789 first laid eyes on each other.
She was standing out there with her 2 girls, and I didn't like, "Are you Nicole Reffitt?" She was like, "Yeah." And kind of apprehensive because usually there's a reason for, "Hey, I know you."
We'd never met prior to that. And she came, and it always chokes me because Guy being the first trial and everything is very polarizing because nobody wanted to touch it in any direction. So we were very alone. And then here comes Mickey.
Call it a kinship or trauma bonding, but whatever their connection was, it was immediate.
When I met Mickey, I knew she was grieving, and I felt that grief. I think Mickey and I saw a lot of that in each other, that we weren't alone, but we felt very alone.
When I first saw Nicole, I knew instantly who she was. And she just had this defiant, strong-ass woman look on her face. And I just knew she was somebody I could be friends with.
After Guy's sentencing, Nicole walked toward a scrum of reporters. Mickey watched from the side, shouting support as Nicole told the assembled media,
All I can say, tell Nicole, is that y'all can all go to hell and I'm going back to Texas. Amen.
Then Mickey and Nicole, complete strangers up to this point, have a sort of ride off into the sunset moment together. They walk away from the courthouse hand in hand. The online trolls had a field day with the photos that later circulated, but it didn't matter. They weren't alone anymore.
She just looked at me and I looked at her, and it was just like, let's go. They can't do anything else to us.
On the next episode, Trump really leans in and picks up the cause as his own.
The person that shot Ashley Babbitt, boom, right through the head, just boom. There was no reason for that. And why isn't that person being opened up, and why isn't that being studied? They've already written it off. They said, that case is closed. If that were the opposite, that case would be going on for years and years, and it would not be pretty.
So it's time to ask the big question. Did these 2 hand-holding, strong-ass women divert the course of history?
That's next on We Live Here Now.
We Live Here Now is a production of The Atlantic. The show was reported, written, and executive produced by me, Lauren Ober. Hannah Rosen reported, wrote, and edited the series. Our senior producer is Ryder Alsop. Our producer is Ethan Brooks. Original scoring, sound design, and mix engineering by Brendan Baker. This series was edited by Scott Stossel and Claudine Abade. Fact-checking by Michelle Siraka. Art direction by Colin Hunter. Project management by Nancy DeVille.
Claudine Abade is the executive producer of Atlantic Audio, and Andrea Valdez is our managing editor. The Atlantic's executive editor is Adrienne LaFrance. Jeffrey Goldberg is the Atlantic's editor-in-chief.